Chaitanya Giri is, are you here? Yes. Yes, wonderful. And our governing board member uh, will be discussing Long Siege. Chaitanya Giri is a scientist turned techno strategy analyst. He is trained as a planetary scientist and has worked on the world's first ever mission to land on a comet. Interesting. Do we have this comet that's just passing by or have already passed by, no? He has gradually moved towards research on the scientific and technological security of Bharat and the world, and more importantly, from a Bharatiya vantage point. Chaitanya has worked closely with the country's scientific and security agencies and academic institutions. In doing so, has developed a passion for studying the true and revelatory facts of Bharat's scientific and technological history, filled with tremendous heroic grit and sacrifice. So, welcome everyone, Chaitanya and Mr. Aravindan. There you go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a book discussion about the long siege, 500 years of India's struggle for techno-political freedom. So this book has been written by Dr. Chaitanya Giri, as he has been introduced. He was involved with a lot of important projects like landing an instrument in a comet, and also he has been involved in the study of the origin of life. So we have actually a real-time scientist in flesh before us. This book is about the history of science and politics. So I will start this session by asking him the question, what prompted you to write this book?
Thank you, Aravindan ji. Pleasure being here amongst you all. Thank you for being here in large numbers at nearly the fag end of a great festival that we've had. So thank you for your patience and interest in this particular topic. Firstly, let me tell you, this wasn't supposed to be the title of this book. In my mind, the title was, and the working title was, The Labyrinthine Long War. I mean, long, you get the connotation, why long? But I've used the word labyrinthine because the war that we fought was not exactly for political control or forming a government of our own or governance system of our own, creating a republic out of it. Yes, these are important milestones, but then there are other milestones that we were also wanting to attain. And a big milestone was to earn the scientific autonomy for ourselves, the freedom to do our own science in our own way, with our own darshana. And that wasn't happening for a long time because the entire effort of colonization was to ensure that Indians remain subservient to the non-Indian, the colonizers' way of pursuing science. And since all the scientific innovation that you see coming out of, especially out of Europe over the past 400, 500 years, it was weaponized to a great extent. Weaponized because the goal was to avert any battle on European soil, externalize these battles elsewhere, and at the same time going around the world, into Africa, into South America, into Asia, and kind of tap into the immense wealth, natural wealth of these regions, and make use out of it. It was one kind of one-upmanship that was going around. The reason why I started writing it was because I believe that a lot of our scientific institutions, and including scientists, who are very good at what they do, but they still even today carry a baggage of colonialism. It gets reflected for somebody who is prescient, who is able to see through a lot of chatter, a lot of popular talk, popular narrative around it. So for instance, just recently, we have a very old institution known as the Survey of India. It is governed by the Department of Science and Technology. Now, the Survey of India was established in 1767, 7 years after the Third War of Panipat. And this Survey of India, the DST says that it is the oldest scientific institution in India. Now, what did the British come here for? They came here for exploitation. They came here for loot. They came here for surveying the natural wealth, the landscape, the terrain of the country, and tapping into all those resources to garner all the wealth. So what kind of surveys were done? Of course, there was a trigonometric survey which sort of mapped the terrain, the measurement of the height of the Himalayan peaks, all that came out of that. Then you had the Botanical Survey of India, you had the Zoological Survey of India. It was all done to have the last mile mapped of all kinds, of the trees that grow here, so that you can derive chemical compounds, pharmaceutical compounds, pharmacochemical compounds out of it, animals, because you remember, right, the most number of tigers that were killed were during the British times. It eventually took one amongst them, Jim Corbett, to put a stop at all of that. I don't say that there were not good people around. Yes, there were good people around who kind of put an end to a lot of malpractice, but science was being used for malpractices. And here you are, even today, unable to dissociate a lot of symbolism that we still carry subliminally without much thought given to it, because all of us, especially in the scientific world, we are like horses. We've just put blinkers all across our eyes. We just focus on our science, the results that come out, publishing the papers, graduating from an assistant professor or a scientist C to D to E to F, whatever, moving up the hierarchy and enjoying the perks that the government offer. But the larger point is that there's a lot of symbolism, colonial symbolism to get rid of. And I started looking at that symbolism. Perhaps it was a lot of Dan Brown impact on me while I was reading Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code and all that. So symbolism word kind of lingered on my mind a lot. And I saw that, and that's why this book comes out.
Right. One of the aspects that I find in this book is that you are talking about the capturing of the ports along the coastal lines, okay? And you have these great naval battles that are getting played out in our the Sindhu Saga, the so-called Arabian Sea, and Bay of Bengal and other areas. The question that comes to mind is
Ganga Sagar.
Ganga Sagar. Okay, that's nice. Okay, we used to call it Vanga Saga.
Vanga Saga.
Okay, so the question that comes to the mind is that, okay, people are fighting battles, naval battles in those seas and other things. You people can do science within your own place. So how is that impacting the science? How is that impacting the institutionalization of science in India? Can you explain? That you have actually explained in the book. Yeah. What the book says about it.
So the book starts with the Battle of Diu, 1508, 1509. And as I said in the introduction, that it was being fought by armies or navies which were alien to our lands. They were not around in India. They had nothing to do with the Southern Asia, or they were not part of West Asia. You had the Ottomans coming from the Levant. You had the Mamluks coming from Egypt to help the Muzaffarid dynasty in Gujarat. Now, this Muzaffarid dynasty was against the Portuguese. Again, non-native, fighting in your own waters. So what happens is, when you kind of bring all such inimical forces to your lands, it is, of course, you're going to get ravaged. So that is what began happening around 1500s. Later on, what you see is, I'll give you a small example. There was a major accident that happened in the 17th century just south of Liverpool in the Atlantic Ocean. And major accident, that ship completely submerged. It got caught in the storm. It hit some rocks mid-ocean, and all the people, all the sailors in that ship passed away. And it was a major tragedy at that time for London. So that is when the British Admiralty, which is their navy back then, as well as the Royal Now this longitude rewards is nothing but a startup grant where the, the crown decided that, look, we want to have some kind of innovation to ensure that such kind of accidents don't happen. Number one, we are spreading all across the world. We are wanting to become an empire where the sun doesn't set. And that's why you need certain major innovations coming up. Firstly, timekeeping. Secondly, you need precise positioning of where the ship is. And at the same time, you need communications. So the kind of watches that we wear today, there's one type of watch which is known as the chronometer. The chronometer, the origins of chronometer comes from that longitude rewards. So you had a far-looking crown, we should give it to them, which was not only taking care of their own sailors, of their own citizens, subjects, but it was also innovating because it had ships to move around. It had trade to be carried out all over the world. We had no ships. We had no trade to be carried on because it was all plugged. By the 16th, 17th century, it was all getting plugged. After the Buxar and Plassey, your ports in and around Kolkata became Fort William. Here in Madras, you had Fort George. In Mumbai, you had another fort. All the major ports that you see today of India were taken up and completely plugged. You were not allowed to build commodity ships. Container ships were not there back then. You were not allowed to build ships. Your trading linkages were controlled entirely by those transnational entities which were not only controlling your ports, but they also had ports elsewhere. So think of British who had ports in Hong Kong, who had ports in Southeast Asia, Burma, India, West Asia, in the Trucial states, in Aden, Yemen, your Suez, and then into Mediterranean. So it was not just ports, they were controlling a network of ports that was spanning all across the world.
So the original string of pearls.
The original string of pearls. And we didn't here have even one pearl in our hands. And today, when you see an Indian government putting in a lot of efforts in building something known as the Sagarmala, we are wanting to build the trade corridors, be it corridor going to Vladivostok, be it the IMEC corridor, be it the INSTC going via Chabahar. You have to think of it in a longer historical context because we are trying to do something which we were not allowed to do for the past 500 years. This will lead to a lot of innovation. Exploration triggers innovation. Trade triggers innovation. Security of that trade triggers innovation. And we were left bereft of innovation just because our ports were taken charged of, in control of.
So this is one aspect. Another one aspect that we were just sitting and we were discussing was that you mentioned about, in fact, we were talking about Kanhoji Angre and Veer Shivaji. The difference between Veer Shivaji and Kanhoji Angre in a way was that Shivaji was able to link the military presence along with the trade capital formation. So it was an extraordinary vision as you explained it. And had it continued in a parallel universe, India would have become a scientific power, right?
Absolutely. So let me give you an interesting tidbit here, which has been detailed in detail mentioned in the book. Remember just a few years ago, just 2-3 years ago, the insignia of the Indian Navy was changed. Now you have an octagon which is inspired by the seal of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Prior to that, remember how it looked, the Indian Navy's insignia?
It was a cross.
Whose cross?
George.
George's cross. Who's George? It was the patron saint of Ledda, one of the Knights Templar. Why was George's cross used? Because back in the good old days, 1400s, 1500s, when Europeans had pushed back the Islamic forces from southern Europe back into Levant, that was the time when there was a fear amongst all these entities. And Islamic forces also included their traders. They feared the cross. They feared it very much. And of course, all the Dogi of Genoa, the traders of the thalassocratic states in Greece and Italy, all of them were using that cross. Nobody touched them. Nobody dared to touch them. The Brits started trading into the Mediterranean. And they figured out that they are getting attacked every now and then. So to avoid the attack, they found out that this is one of the solutions. They went to the Dogi of Genoa and said that, look, can you just lend it? We are ready to pay tributes to you. It was agreed upon, and that's how a symbol was purchased from the Italian maritime republics by the British. It is not their symbol at all.
That's very interesting.
So, I'll just conclude. All this was informed in 2018 by the mayor of Genoa, the city of Genoa in Italy. He wrote a letter to the Queen that, look, you haven't paid us tribute because at that point in time, our thalassocratic republic was taken over by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and you have dues to pay. So it was written in a light-hearted manner, but it was the real fact. And here we are, for all these 75 years, we used a symbol which was not even British. So we haven't paid attention to certain symbols. We could have easily got rid of it, but we didn't know about it. So that's the irony, and that kind of symbolism exists in various other areas, and that only shows that we haven't yet completely got rid of colonialism, because it is one kind of intoxication.
Yes.
And that intoxication still, it is in our minds, and it is very difficult to get rid of unless you put in efforts. After you drink, you need a shot of lemon, right? So you have to take this lemon now.
Talking about symbolism in scientific institutions right now in India, you have mentioned this. The granite etching at the Madras Observatory, and it is inscribed this way: by which, as the lapse of many centuries makes but little impression upon this granite, posterity may be informed 1,000 years hence of the period when the mathematical sciences were first planted by British liberality in Asia. That is, this is in Madras. They are saying that for the first time mathematical sciences were first planted by British liberality in Asia. May they take deep root and branch forth into every useful, every elegant art, long prove a blessing to the future generations of this extensive empire. So, can you comment upon this? This is actually, I didn't even know that. I have been to Madras a lot of times, and I didn't even know that such an demeaning, humiliating inscription exists in a scientific establishment, and nobody has even bothered about it. Thank you for bringing this up. Can you explain?
So again, Madras Observatory is part of 2 or 3 major astronomical and geomagnetic observatories that the British had set up along the port cities. You have one in Colaba, in south of Bombay, near Navy Nagar. There's a Colaba Observatory. All those who go to the US club there, it's a Navy club, very prestigious one. Just right opposite it is the observatory. Those observatories were built to ensure that the ships are communicated well as they approach the docks from the deep seas. A similar one was set up here in Chennai. Now, this observatory in Chennai is controlled by, or is governed by, again, the Department of Science and Technology. It's governed by Indian Institute of Astrophysics. As I said, the intoxication lies to this extent that even IIA says that this is our first observatory. And they don't even pay attention to the grammar, what is written, how demeaning it is, how humiliating it is. And that needed to be pointed out. It completely leaves us bereft of the great mathematical geniuses that we had for millennia, right from the discovery of zero, or even before that, the great architecture that we built, the great astronomical discoveries that we
Kerala
made,
School of
the
Mathematics.
Kerala School of Astronomy, then the Vedashalas that were established by Savai Raja Jai Singh of Jaipur, the Jantar Mantars as it is popularly called. It does not acknowledge Aryabhatta. It does not acknowledge Kamalakar Bhatta, that a more recent astronomer.
I just want to tell you
Yeah.
one thing. There was an Indian, a Tamil scholar who interviewed Jayant Vishnu Nallikar. I have great respect for Jayant Vishnu Nallikar, great scientist, a great science popularizer and all that. So this Tamil journalist interviewed Jayant Vishnu Nallikar and asked him this question. So how do you see yourself as the coming in the lineage of Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta? And then he said no. That lineage had stopped. I come in the lineage of Galileo, Newton, and I see myself that way only. Okay. So that is the level.
There is a reason for it. Because Raja Jai Singh was the last of the masonry astronomers. One who could, or last of the patrons of masonry astronomy, which involved stone structures and stone structures creating those precise astronomical measurements. While he was building that in 1730s, 1740s, by then the church had already crucified and put Galileo to death, which means an optical astronomical telescope was in place. You had several Jesuit astronomers traveling to East Asia, Far East. They used to had a stopover. They used to have a stopover in Goa, in Daman, even here in Chennai. The first nearest star to be observed, it's known as Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri was first observed from Chennai
By a Jesuit.
by Jesuit. But the thing was, nobody, for the fear of retribution from the European powers, were able to share. Jesuit astronomers were not sharing the knowledge or know-how of observational astronomy with the Indian ones. So there was a fair amount of distance between the two. Raja Jai Singh had sent a delegation of his own astronomers to Portugal to study some European advances in astronomy. But Portugal was not the country to go to because it had made no great forays into astronomy. It was Germany, France and UK which were really going well. But having gone to Portugal, Portugal was not sending them there because A, France was an enemy, B, Portugal was a Catholic country, it wouldn't send anybody to the Protestant United Kingdom, and they had no route of going to Italy because the itinerary didn't help. So there was no exposure to optical astronomy, visual, which involved telescopes. That's why you see modern Indian astronomers, although they talk about Indian astronomy with great reverence, but they do not want to, or they do not kind of see themselves part of that lineage.
They see a kind of a break.
They see a break in there. Okay. And that's the break that I have mentioned, why it was there. Our kings, they fought great wars, the Sikhs, the Marathas, the Ahoms, down south, the Cheras, the Cholas, the Pandyas, the Kerala kingdoms. But none of them were economically well off enough to patronize science on a generational basis. You had kings who had a penchant for astronomy, but it could not have been transferred. The Marathas were economic, or the chest, the war chest, or even their economy was extremely poor in that sense. So patronage was needed, whereas, and our economy was completely derailed. Your land-bound economy was completely derailed. You had Periskas, you had all the Romani, the Lamani people trading commodities, trading salt from India through Central Asia to Levant, up to Europe. All those trading linkages were broken down because of two major acts. One act was the 1540 Egyptian Act, and one was 1834, if I correctly remember the year, Vagrancy Act, where it was made sure that the Europeans legitimized their hate for the Romani people, the Roma people. Okay. And that's how the land-bound trade was killed. And of course, as I said, the sea-bound trade was also plugged. Right. So there was no way for innovation, there was no way for Adan Pradan or exchange of any kind of scientific knowledge.
Now here I want to add one very interesting thing. You told that you need actually building of science institutions, and that is not possible with your economy derailed and your mobility being completely arrested by the British. Interestingly, one king tried to do something very wonderful. He was the Sarfoji Maharaj, the Maratha Maharaj of Tanjavur. So what he tried to do was, he learnt heliocentric astronomical theories. He wanted to take it to his subjects, to the students. So what he did, he converted the whole thing in the form of a literature called Kuravanji literature, a ballad, a local form of ballad, in which Narada was visiting Indraloka, and Indrani asked him, what are the new things that have developed in the earth? So Narada takes Indrani and then shows the earth, explains that the people have figured out that actually the earth revolves around the sun. And this actually he called it, the king Sarfoji called it Huna Sastra, Huna Siddhanta. Okay. And this, most probably this was the first popular science method of taking science to the people. Unfortunately, what happened was, the educational system through which this would be transmitted, that is, see, here he explains it very, very beautifully, that science teaching was not just science teaching. It was actually a colonization project. They are civilizing you. So the colonial empire has a reason to exist. They are civilizing you, they are removing your superstitions, that way they are also evangelizing you. What the king Sarfoji did was, he removed these two aspects from science teaching. In our own Indian context, you can teach science. So that way he tried. Unfortunately, after that, the Macaulay system came. So this kind of teaching was not allowed anymore. Okay. So please, yes. And
I'll take a completely new, I'll bring out a completely new take on Macaulay system. 1851 is when the three first Indian universities were established, modern Indian universities. Let me put that very specifically. Modern Indian Western universities. Madras, Calcutta, Bombay. The entire project is known as Wood's Dispatch. There was some British bureaucrat who had kind of modeled all these universities on a collegiate platform. So all these are collegiate universities. You see a lot of colleges affiliated to these three. For the next 80 to 90 years, none of these three universities had a science department within it. So if you look at the history of all these three universities, it's available on their respective websites or in their respective repositories. The first science departments. Can you imagine a university which does not do science at all? The British were not interested in teaching or you letting to know science or sponsoring any scientific experiment or any scientific innovation, invention or anything. Rather, it was quite a humiliating experience for some of the great scientists who came later on. Your C.V. Raman, your J.C. Bose. J.C. Bose had to fight for his salary when he was in Presidency College. Later on, he moved on to an institute which was set up by Indians. It was known as the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science, which is based in Mahendra Lal Sarkar. So, in the late 1800s, when you had a neo middle class, all the kings and the princely kingdoms had really, gone into the backseat. You had a neo middle class which came up. That neo middle class of jurists, doctors, barristers, well-to-do traders, well-to-do, people from other businesses, especially from law and medicine. They had the money, they had the social panache, they had their networks. They kind of gathered money to create institutions like these. There was no support from the British for sciences at all. So the first Nobel Prize that comes up for C.V. Raman, it's an entirely Indian effort. The Brits have nothing to do with it. This has all been mentioned in the book. Then there were great efforts that were happening in Maharashtra at that point in time. There's an extensive mention of that in this book. That
I want to come to that. Because you have pointed out something that even before independence, a kind of a copycat socialist approach of Nehru was trying to derail capital formation and thus indirectly the science institution building in India.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate upon that?
Yes,
The
yes,
Bombay Declaration.
yes, the Bombay Manifesto. So, as I said, there were Indian efforts towards generating scientific capacities in the country. You all must have heard about India House. There was this India House which existed in London, associated with Savarkar, Madan Lal Dhingra, other revolutionaries there, and the great efforts that took up. If you look at the academic qualifications or the leanings of those who were studying in the London India House, it was more towards law. Most of them were lawyers, or wanting to study law or those kind of subjects. There was another India House that had come up in Tokyo, and that was set up just because of the fact that here in Maharashtra, with Turk having had his Kesari and Maratha under his control, he was in touch with what Meiji Japan was doing at that point in time. Meiji Japan was industrializing in a very rapid manner, and a lot of industrial innovation. Some of the biggest companies that you hear even today coming out of Japan, Shimadzu's, the Mitsubishis, later on, a bit later, the Toyotas, all of them were kind of evolving around that period, 1880s, 1890s. So there was immense fascination for the fact that if the Japanese could industrialize, so could we. So there were certain delegations that were sent to Japan, and out of some efforts, and here there was some synergy between India as well as the Kingdom of Nepal. Together they had created some networks into Tokyo. It has been mentioned in the book in detail. But the fact is that that is when the Indian neo-middle class, the Swadeshi and the revolutionary movement came combined, it merged, and it pushed for industrialization of India. If you look at the Industrial Commission report that was created in 1818, after the First World War, that is when we started negotiating with the British for some kind of autonomy for us. We told them that, look, we are honest subjects of the British Empire. We want to contribute well to the larger economy, and for that, we can't just remain an agrarian country. We have to industrialize. And in that pursuit, there is a very nicely written note by Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, where he mentions that we need a cadre of scientists. We need a cadre of people who would be trained in industrial manufacturing. And you need so many steps to ensure that India becomes a fine economic hotspot of the British Empire. Later on, 1936, there is this very interesting thing where 1936, around that time, Pandit Nehru was the president of the Congress party. And somehow that was also a period when there was a tremendous, what's the word for it? It was a churn, and Nehru wasn't very positive about it. He had a bleak kind of period. He was going through certain low. And that is when he kind of made statements that you hear even today, that you need to use up wealth from all the wealthy people and distribute it with the amongst the poor, something of that sort. That led to a dissent coming from 40 major business houses based out of Mumbai, and that entire letter is known as the Bombay Manifesto. It's mentioned, that letter is mentioned in this book, and that Bombay Manifesto kind of lambasted that kind of a view. Next, in the next year, you have Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose becoming the president of the Congress party, and that is when he started galvanizing the same views that some 20 years ago Madan Mohan Malviya ji had espoused, and kind of pushed for the industrialization of Indian sciences. There you have the foundations of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research being set. Of course, later on, when Nehru and Bose both were pals, Nehru became the chairman of this particular committee that was set up within the Congress party. And eventually you had contributions from greats like Meghnad Saha, and you had contributions from, of course, Nehru, Bose, and the first Industries and Supplies Minister, who's the Shama Prasad Mukherjee. All of them combined, and together you find by 1942, you had the first national chemical laboratory, you have the first national physical laboratory, chemical laboratory in Pune, physical laboratory in Delhi, and you have the metallurgical laboratory in Calcutta, Kolkata. So the foundations of the science have come from revolutionaries, those who had Swadeshi mindset. And they were the ones who kind of laid the foundations for the modern science that happens even to this day.
So it is not exactly the scientific temper of Nehru that created the modern India. It belongs to the Swadeshi spirit.
Yes.
Right. It's a wonderful book. How much time more we have? 3 minutes. Okay.
Very precise.
See. So this is a very wonderful book. You can read it. It's the language is very lucid. It contains a lot of data, a lot of information. It will change your perspective of how we do science, and that science is not actually without any political biases. The scientific institutions have political biases. They have colonial pedigrees. So we have to decolonize in a very deep way. This book talks about that. The book is very important. I wish each and every one of you purchase this book. You want to tell final word regarding the book?
The final word is that although it speaks of history, it's not a history book. I'm not an historian. I can't claim to be that, but it's a strategic analysis of history, because that is what something is needed. The world is moving into a period of great churn hereafter. Of course, there is Industry 4.0. Of course, there is an industrial revolution coming. You have the convergence of cyber and physical systems. The last line that I have written in the book is that this might be one of the last books entirely written by humans, because tomorrow, never know, you may have authors using ChatGPT to write their entire books altogether. So while all this happens, why decolonization of Indian scientific temper is necessary? Because you don't want to carry that same temper, that same colonial vestiges into the artificial intelligences that you are creating, or anybody else might be creating, the Chinese or the Americans or the Europeans. So you have to go with the Indic mindset. You have to create a kind of a protocol to decolonize fast, because this is the sweet spot. You may have a window of 10-15 years until the next round of innovation takes you over. So feel free to buy this book and share reviews.
I have a
with
request
me.
also, Dr. Chaitanya Giri. So this should be the start of a whole series of books that deals with this subject in different areas, biology, ecology.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I'll try.
Thank you, Chaitanya and Aravindan. And may we request Aravindan to facilitate. There you go. There, no? Another. Yeah. Wonderful.